I feel that the title of pastor applies to me whether I'm actually serving churches or not. Chaplain works too. But the work of pastor for me is the work of caring for people, of knowing my neighbors, loving my neighbors, and building connections between them so that they can care and love for each other. Start over. I graduated from Duke Divinity School in 2019 and accepted my first appointment here to the Longs and Crusoe United Methodist Church Charge in Canton, North Carolina. I served Longs and Crusoe for 4 years, from 2019 to 2023. During that time, a lot happened. We went through the COVID pandemic. We had to learn how to do church in a different way. I got married in 2020, and in the middle of COVID, so we had a very small COVID wedding. And then she got diagnosed with classic Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2021. So on August 17th, 2021, she entered remission. And we had that good news at about 10 a.m. in the morning. At 3 p.m. the same day, Tropical Storm Fred dumped 14 inches of water on the Blue Ridge Parkway and caused a devastating flash flood that killed 6 people in the Crusoe Valley, which is where my church, Crusoe United Methodist, is located. The church did not flood, although several other churches in the area did. And because of that, our church ended up serving as sort of the aid distribution hub. And so we learned a lot of lessons through that. We saw the community come together. I sort of stepped into coordinating a lot of resources for the community and helping to kickstart the Methodist disaster relief ministry again. So as you can imagine, with all of that happening, I started to get kind of exhausted doing 2 full-time jobs of pastoring 2 churches and also doing disaster relief coordination for my whole community. So in 2023, I ended my service to Longs and Crusoe churches. I love my churches, but they knew and I knew that I needed a break. So I took 3 months of transitional leave and I came back and I started working as a bereavement coordinator and a chaplain for Haywood Hospice and Palliative Care. When I saw the news of Hurricane Helene on the horizon, on the forecast, of course, my heart and my mind, turned to the flood that I've experienced already in this community in Crusoe in 2021. And I knew that this time around I couldn't be in that central role of coordinating, that I couldn't take on a leadership role, but I was here to support them. So thankfully, because of the storm in 2021, we were able to be better organized this time around, and already we're preparing ahead of the storm for how we would respond to the needs of our community. We've been doing monthly gatherings for friends and neighbors, potlucks, bonfires, just hanging out, building community. And so when the storm hit, we decided to continue that, but actually stepped it up and started doing weekly gatherings on Saturdays. Because a lot of our friends in Asheville were out of power. We were out of power for 7 days. We were out of power and water. But the friends in Asheville have been out of water, or clean drinking water at least, for a lot longer than that. So we said, hey, could just come over and eat a meal with us. You can do your laundry, wash your dishes, take a shower. And so this place became a gathering place for folks that we knew who needed, to get their basic needs met. The stress has been definitely there, but because of what my experience was in 2021, I was able to set good boundaries and just say yes to the things that I knew would bring me joy and that I had skills for and that I wanted to do. Well, one of the things that gives me joy that I had time to contemplate after the storm hit was that I love doing chainsaw work. I worked for the Minnesota Conservation Corps in college for a summer, and I got chainsaw experience clearing trails and down trees. And I just love working with the saw, working with wood, and I've got friends who like living heavy stuff. So we talked about what are we going to do to help folks out in our neighborhood and in the Asheville area. And we said, drop and chop crew. We're going to drop trees and we're going to chop them up. Every Saturday morning from 9 to noon or so, I gather a crew. We go out and do a job that we've identified, either a neighbor or a friend or somebody's been referred to us. And we spend 3 or so hours cutting up wood, splitting it, stacking it, clearing roadways, clearing trees off of downed buildings or cars that have been damaged by the tree fall. And then I always try to make sure I feed my crew lunch. So thankfully, a lot of the churches have had free meals available, so that's been one option people have delivered here. So then we're also just building community, and we're building skills for folks who want to know how to chainsaw or chop wood or just do something good for their community. It takes a long time to build trust here in the mountains, but I've been here for 6 years now, and I know my neighbors. And yes, our space, our home, has been a place where people have felt welcome to gather, and that's why we've been inviting people, because it's about helping people with getting their basic needs met, getting folks water, and giving them a place to do laundry. But it's also about the time that we spend around the table, the time that we spend sitting and talking and sharing stories. So in those conversations, we would invite people up to this space where we'd have opportunities for sharing around a potluck and a bonfire. Very simple. I mean, we didn't have power, so we were cooking on the wood stove in the basement, but we were able to scrape together enough food to feed people, and it was just a beautiful thing. And so, yeah, it takes time to build trust, but people really needed the outlet, someplace to come and gather and hear other people's stories and share their own. Well, after I left the church for some rest and relaxation, I took transitional leave. And so going into the storm, I was in a really strong place spiritually, praying 3 times a day using the Common Prayer app, and just spending time listening to God and being in a relationship with God and taking my direction from God. And so when the storm hit, I felt like I was in a very good, grounded spiritual space to help my community. I know that we only have one Savior, we only need one Savior, and I'm not here to save the world. But there are things that each of us can do, and that those daily moments of prayer and meditation and rest are what grounded me and helped me to move through the storm. Well, the church plays a really important role in responding to natural disasters. The Canton Missional Network, for example, is 15 churches and nonprofit organizations in the Canton area that have the experience of responding to the tropical storm Fred flood that killed 6 people in Crusoe. And because of that experience, they were able to get together, organize, and coordinate. And the advice that I gave them this time around was that we need to specialize, we need to coordinate, we need to communicate. And so early on, we figured out what people's abilities were. I mean, that all changed with the storm. Some people lost power, internet, water at their church buildings. And so using those places as resource hubs didn't work. So we figured out the churches that could. We figured out the churches that had Starlink. We were able to refer people within that network. And of course, because we were organized, people started coming to us. The county government started coming to the Canton Missional Network, city officials, outside groups, and we were able to effectively coordinate. And we know our community, and I think that's what churches are best at in a disaster, is that we know our neighbors, we know our community, and we know we can help figure out where the need is sooner. Because when a storm hits, you don't necessarily always know who needs help. It really takes a lot of person-to-person conversations. And on top of that, you've got to have that conversation about how to be okay with accepting help, because there's a lot of pride here in the mountains. And so coaching people through that and reminding folks of, in our Christian faith, the fact that, for example, Galatians 6:2 says, bear one another's burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ. Yes, I know, as you say, there are some people who had it worse off, and we're going to help them tomorrow when we find them. And actually, if you know those people, would you let us know who they are, and we'll go talk to them. But today, we want to help you. And so having those conversations is the work that the church has been doing, and it's been a way of connecting people with needs to the places that and the people who are providing those needs, but also just encouraging everyone that we all need help sometimes. Well, survival and resiliency are traits that we build skills in not out of choice. Things happen. The floods that we experienced in Crusoe, the closing of the Canton paper mill, and then this recent storm, yes, they've built our resiliency. They've built our survival skills. Most importantly, they've built our community connections. And I guess what I've learned through all of these natural and unnatural disasters is that we need to grieve well. We need to find ways to actually sit with the emotions that come up in these circumstances, understand how we relate to those emotions, be kind to ourselves, be generous and graceful to ourselves when we're tired, when we're exhausted, when we don't know what the answers are, and then find places where we can gather and share that experience with other people. So in addition to working with Haywood Hospice and Palliative Care as a hospice chaplain, I've also recently started a nonprofit, which is called Heartfelt Haywood, Living, Grieving, and Dying Well. And one of our first projects is to provide grief support to the community, to adults and children. And we have active programs right now, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly, where we are giving people that space to provide an opportunity for them to share what they're going through and to process it together, because we know that when we process grief well, we can heal from trauma. We know that when we process grief well, we have an opportunity to change our lives. We have an opportunity to reevaluate what our purpose is. And so I'm impassioned by this work because I see the way people who have experienced devastating loss have been able to come out of it better and stronger and more themselves.